Let's get at her. It is another episode of the Manely Broncos Podcast. And reminder that for anybody that is watching the stream, make sure you hit that subscribe button over there on the MHRT Network page. And also make sure you hit the like over there on Facebook over there on the MHRT Network. It's an absolute blast. We have a co-host of the Broncos app, and it was his first time going to Denver, Colorado for a Broncos game, and I think it's safe to say he picked a pretty good game to go to, but nonetheless, Jordan joins the show, and he's going to be talking all about Jayden Daniels, since he is the leading, he is the leader of the fan club of Jayden Daniels for the Washington Commanders. And obviously, too, we have Brandon Miller, not to be confused by Brandon Miller, the basketball player that is in the NBA. So, like, if you guys are, just randomly tagging, at Brandon Miller PO, just want to remind people that, as you can clearly see visually, they are not the same person. So, Brandon, how are you doing, pal?
Well, I won a bunch of people their parlays, so I'm doing well.
I mean, I could have sworn this was.
I actually don't know. I didn't watch. I have no idea how I'm doing. I don't know how I'm performing. But actual me, I'm doing well. I'm doing really well. That was fun. That was fun.
It's only appropriate before we dive into the game and we talk a little bit about it.
Let's go Broncos! God bless Bo Nix!
That's right. Jordan, why don't you lead it off, in terms of like the overall experience of what it is that you had with the game. It was awesome. I mean, like you said that you kind of like had the chance to kind of experience all of downtown Denver. I know that you and I are fortunate, to go to an Avs game, Friday. Obviously the result didn't exactly go, as planned, but obviously it made up for it. Going to the game on Sunday, but kind of take us through your overall, Colorado experience, the downtown Denver experience, and then obviously what led to the cherry on top, the biggest cherry on top.
Yeah, I mean, it was awesome. I was fortunate enough to save, some money, and right before I graduate here in December, to make my trip that I've been wanting to make since I was very, very little. Whenever I was going through the airports, traveling for basketball reasons, I always see like that gate of, hey, this flight's going to Denver. And I was always, as a little kid, like, one day I want to get on that flight so I can go see my Broncos. And that day was this past weekend. And it was just awesome. Like, this is only the second time I've been to my favorite team's like stadium or arena out of Miami. So like, for example, with the New Jersey Devils in New Jersey, I went there and I saw that team store. And, this is the first time I actually see a team store with all of my favorite stuff. And then I go to Denver, and I mean, I'm seeing all these Broncos gears. I mean, that's very rare for me, because here in Miami, there is none. I mean, there's very few stuff limited, like at malls and stuff, but to see like the amount of like overwhelming gear and merchandise, I mean, that's when like it really hit me. And like going to the stadium, it's one thing to see the stadium through the TV copy, but it's another one to experience it in person, obviously. But I just view that stadium so differently now, just because I've been in it now and how massive it is. The fans are awesome. The Jumbotron's electric. It's big. It's huge. The Broncos sculpture on top, the white Bronco is awesome. I mean, just everything about it was just magical. Even the weather was like 40 degrees, blue skies, not a cloud in the sky. Like, you couldn't have asked for like a better day for football wise. Like, everything was perfect leading up to the game. And then once the ball kicked off, I mean, one of the best Broncos wins, not only have I experienced, but I think anybody has experienced right now over the past, 8 years, you want to say, 10 years? I mean, that was pretty special what we saw on Sunday.
How would you describe the overall fan experience from the Atlanta Falcons side of things? I personally thought that the Falcons were actually pretty like reasonable. You know what I mean? Like there wasn't, you know, really anybody that I encountered, you know, from the Falcon side of things that were rude or unruly or, you know, anything like that.
Yeah, the ones that were in my section, which was only like 2 or 3, they weren't like any like spoiled losers or whatever you want to say. I think they were just, you know, normal fans that just saw a bad outcome for their team. They weren't, you know, talking smack or doing any of that. I think they were just trying to enjoy the game. And if I'm being quite honest, I think they were more surprised at what our rookie quarterback did and just, you know, enamored with that because they do have a rookie on their side that they actually got to see play towards the end of it. And you know, hoping that, you know, Penix can one day, you know, take that step when he does get that chance. But yeah, I didn't experience any, you know, bad blood between the Falcons fans. I think they were pretty cool, to be honest, because I know down here in Miami, especially, you go to a Dolphins game or even if you go to a game, which you know everybody knows I am a Canes fan. Those opposing fans can get a bit rowdy in Miami, you know, especially with the atmosphere in Miami and stuff like that. You know, Miami's known for a lot of things, but it can get pretty ugly, but Denver was cool all around, though.
Nice. Let's dive a little bit into the game. We'll save, you know, the probably the leading conversation for a little bit later because I figure it's kind of fitting we talk about the one that's probably, you know, as deserving as much as that quarterback, and that is, you know, this defense. This defense, you know, Brandon. Like I thought that had Bo Nix not had the game of his life, and obviously the offense have the game of its life against the Falcons, we would be talking a lot about this defense that performed against the Falcons, Brandon, because like they didn't allow a single touchdown. There was, I mean, they had playmakers all across the board. Bijan Robinson, who they just completely shut down. Kyle Pitts, completely shut down. Drake London was a non-factor. Basically, it was the perfect scheme up of, look, we're going to let these guys like Ray McLeod beat you, and you know, and some of these other guys, maybe even Darnell Mooney was a non-factor, you know, for part of that game, and he's having a very under the radar type year for the Falcons. So, Brandon, they just. The entire defensive line completely set the tone from the first snap.
Yeah. I mean, at what point is he going to get it? No. But like, obviously you ask pretty much any Broncos fan and really almost any football fan, if there are any Broncos players that are potentially in the mix for defensive player of the year, everyone's always going to say Pat Surtain. Makes a lot of sense. I can't fault them for that. But I feel like he's not in that conversation. And I'm not even saying he deserves to be in that conversation. But Nick Bonito is almost the better player on this defense right now. Like, and that's an insane thing to say. And I'm not taking it away from Surtain. I'm literally wearing his jersey. It's still Surtain. But Nick Bonito is so good that he's literally like, instead of it being who is the clearly obvious best player on this Broncos defense, it's Pat Surtain. And now it's like, is it like you have to think about it for a quick second? It's still Pat Surtain, but the fact that you can hesitate is insane. And it's because of Nick Bonito, who should have 10 sacks.
Yes, he should. I'm assuming you're referring to the one that he almost had on Mahomes.
I'm actually also referring to the one that he should have had against the Ravens. So maybe 11.
Probably 11, all right? We keep bumping this up.
It was that like tackle for the loss that I think he was credited with because they said it was a run, but it wasn't a run.
Well, also, yeah, I mean, the one that came up to my mind was when Mahomes just threw it out and he was almost down. I mean,
that's also true. So he should have 11.
Yeah. And it's actually pretty funny that you mentioned that because I think the NFL just tweeted like 30 minutes ago the sack leaders, and it was right now is tied for second. And it's refreshing to finally see a Bronco once again top of the sack leaders board, you know, top 5. I mean, we haven't had that dominant guy as of late. And right now, Nick Bonito is, I don't think even crushing it is the proper words to describe it. He is right now what they call, like the coaching staff calls a Tuesday player. Like when they start week prepping for their opponent, and Tuesdays they go over the players they have to worry about on the other team who can really wreck the game. Nick Bonitto's becoming that guy. I mean, it's going to free up a lot of other pass rushers that we have on this team. But the thing is, we're going to free up John Franklin Myers, Cooper. Zach Allen's already having a dominant year. I mean, I don't know what else his defense can achieve.
And Zach Allen is also low-key in that conversation that I talked about.
Yep.
So it's insane. It's actually insane. He's the best pass rusher that we have had since Von Miller.
Yeah, I mean,
is that crazy?
No, there's no way to even sugarcoat it. I mean, like, you know, we've obviously have had the projection conversations about, you know, guys like Baron Browning about possibly being, you know, maybe the most talented of the room, or, you know, Randy Gregory. But what happened to both of those guys? They're no longer here. And so now you get a chance to see the development really take shape with a guy like Bonitto. And, you know, I think it's something we say week in and week out here, but the way he's been developing from a run defensive perspective is one of the biggest reasons why he's also taken off. And, you know, there will be a point where he probably will, and I'm sure there's moments where he has, you know, consumed double teams. But, you know, we saw on Sunday, and, you know, to what you were mentioning, Brandon, like Malcolm Roach got in. Like Malcolm Roach got in for a sack, you know, in this Falcons game. So the more you start focusing on one guy, it does open up opportunities for guys like the law firm of John Franklin Myers and, you know, Malcolm Roach and, you know, Zach Allen. And then obviously there's, you know, Mr. Consistent, the Tim Patrick of the edge roam. And that would be Jonathan Cooper too, that we obviously can't be, you know, forgetting about. And I think it's fitting into what you were talking about, Jordan. I think it's fitting that the guy who's leading right now at 11.5 sacks was a Sean Payton draft pick in Trey Hendrickson at 11.5, who's with the Cincinnati Bengals.
And it's wild to see that the Bengals have the league leading sacker because their defense has not been good.
Yeah, the Bengals have been kind of a travesty so far this year. You know, and then obviously as we are continuing some of the defensive player of the year conversation, I mean, there are a lot of, you know, players deserving, you know, and specifically as we were talking about some of those sack numbers, Dexter Lawrence is obviously, you know, a big part of that. Like he's got 9 for a defensive tackle. That's it's big. Like it's big to see a defensive lineman have those types of numbers. That said, Pat Surtain, Jordan, he is front and center right now in terms of, you know, some of that defensive player of the year conversation. Didn't allow a single reception, you know, on Sunday. So there were some moments where, you know, where it certainly seemed like, you know, he could have been on, you know, Drake London and he probably could have been, on, you know, that fourth down. I feel like I will say this, and you know, from your view, Jordan, of where that was in that game, I felt like there's probably some of a misconception going around. Like, yeah, it probably would have been great to have, you know, PS2 on Drake London on that particular down. But if you actually watch the way that play unfolded, it was actually really good defense, right? It was really good defense all throughout the play. Kirk was just holding the ball, you know, until like the last possible second, and then he found that window with London. So the Broncos secondary overall, specifically on that play, was doing its job.
Yeah, I think just the secondary in general. I know we're going to get into PS2 real quick, but like Riley Moss I think his impact that he's made on this defense so early into the season, I think has really shaped into what this defense has been. Because remember, before the regular season started, even throughout preseason, we were still questioning a bit who's going to be that cornerback 2 right across from Pastor Tanka. That was a really important position. Now that Riley Moss, he has by far solidified that spot. But in terms of his performances week in and week out, it has given this defense an extra boost in terms of what they can do more defensively. I mean, you see Vance Joseph putting all of his trust into Riley Moss on certain matchups. I mean, we already know Jaquan McMillan is one of the best nickels in the league, but like that secondary room, just those three corners, makes this defense multiple in many ways, like blitzing wise, even if they play a little bit of zone, match zone, like they can do so many things. And I think it's a big credit due to Riley Moss, because everyone knows not a lot of quarterbacks are going to throw in Pat Surtain's direction, but when you have them throwing to a guy like a Riley Moss, that's also huge too. And also with this whole PS2 conversation, I really, really hope that he would get, because I think he does get the recognition he does deserve, but I wish the media hypes him up just a little bit more in terms of that Defensive Player of the Year conversation, because usually great corners, they limit the other playmaker, like their best playmaker. Surtain's not doing that. He's completely taking him away.
Yeah.
Like that is a huge difference. I mean, literally, they're not catching the ball against him. Again, great corners, they usually just limit what they do. If their number one receiver averages 80 yards per game, maybe that corner gets him to 40. Surtain's not allowing a catch. I mean, that warrants Defensive Player of the Year conversation, like serious talks of it.
Yeah, it was just wild. And what are your thoughts, Brandon, when we talk about the secondary?
I mean, obviously PS2 has been PS2. Like that's pretty obvious. And I feel like someone whose name has kind of slid a little bit more into the radar, like you haven't heard of as much, is Jaquan Macmillan. Am I pronouncing that correctly now? But another guy who seems to sort of be a little bit under the radar in that secondary is Brandon Jones, the free agent safety we brought in. No one replaces Justin Simmons, who I'm thinking of Surtain somewhere in his jersey. Justin Simmons, who we played against on Sunday, and I'm just not going to talk about his pregame speech. But yeah, I mean, the bar was high, and I will say, like, I think Brandon Jones is doing a pretty admirable job. He has had some injury concerns. Like right now, he's questionable. He's probably going to play, but he's been pretty good.
Well, and I think that to that point, that's like the other angle of this that I thought was so impressive, because a lot of people were really kind of, questioning, how good will this defense be? Because what was it, about an hour and a half before game time, they released the injury report, right? Of like who's active, who's inactive. And it was a surprise call that Brandon Jones was inactive. And so, who's next up? It's Devon Key. And you got to give, if you're handing out game balls, I really do feel like Devon Key would be right up there as far as, players who rightfully deserve, a game ball with the way that he really played in that game. And I thought that just overall, like the entire defense was just, the synergy on that field for the defensive side of things, and obviously the offense, but it was just perfect. I mean, like everybody was in the right angle, the right place, the right time. I mean, there were just, a few plays obviously allowing first downs and stuff like that, that's going to happen during games. But huge kudos to Devon Key for filling that role of Brandon Jones.
Yeah, and I did want to specify, like, I know he was out, but I still think he has not gotten the recognition in general when we talk about this secondary that he should have. And I do think he's going to play against the Raiders is what I meant. But he was questionable for the Falcons and wasn't able to go. But I do think, like, again, age is not, I don't think he's being talked about enough. Even though he wasn't able to play, like, he's just been very good.
Well, I mean, Brandon, like, Jordan, you're there in Florida, and he was with the Dolphins, right? And so, I mean, like, did you see anything like this? And obviously, like, you see obviously the coverage of even from the Dolphin side of things and everything. Like, did you at all see anything like this? Because it seemed like the Dolphins were like 1 foot in, 1 foot out in terms of the fan base on Brandon Jones. So to kind of see this, almost I feel like would surprise a lot of Dolphins fans.
I mean, I saw it to a certain degree. It was just a little bit more frustrating in terms for like a Dolphins fan's perspective. He was hurt a lot here in Miami, but whenever he was on the field, he did show those flashes. Now I will say I think it's two different situations because, and I think there's a different topic for another day, but that Dolphins defense and the players they have on it is a bit soft because I mean they're already on three defensive coordinators in 3 years. They want a more player friendly system over there instead of just getting coached hard. And I think that's why you hear a lot of former Dolphins players now talking. I don't want to say talking smack, but telling the truth of what's happened in those past years with
Fangio, yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of soft talk happening with some of the players over there and all the former players that left and the culture there. But going back to the Brandon Jones situation, I think that has translated though to some extent to the Broncos because I think he does want to get coached hard. And I think you see it. I mean, again, he's shown flashes with the Dolphins, but now you see those flashes just way more consistently with Denver right now.
And I really kind of liked, how you guys were talking about Riley Moss because I thought that, it's just going to continue the conversation. I felt like there was probably a small little stretch there where it looked like he kind of took a little bit of a step back, but like, he rose to the occasion. Like he rose to the occasion specifically in this Falcons game. And I thought that one of the plays that I thought set the tone for the entire game was one that happened. Help me, Jordan and Brandon, but like I think it was the first or second drive of the game for the Falcons, and Kirk took a shot to what looked like from my vantage point, the left side of the field, and challenged Riley on I think it was either a go route or just and Riley had just picture perfect coverage, and you could not have asked for better coverage, and knocks the ball away, and I think that to you guys' point, like that's what makes this scary because and it seemed almost fitting that Riley Moss, with the way that he's been playing, for them to honor like the no-fly zone, and this is probably like the closest thing right now that they probably have had since the no-fly zone. And so when you have a really good shutdown cornerback too, that could be maybe a cornerback one, on some teams, given the certain performance level of how he's playing. What do you do at that point? Like, it's almost like you just throw up your hands, and almost like wave the white flag on every single play because it's like, where do you want to throw to? Because you're not going to target the slot every single time.
I mean, and I do remember the play you're talking about, Riley Moss. I mean, for me, it was on the right side, and them coming towards me. But I mean, it was such a terrific play by Riley Moss. And again, I just said it before. The things the defense can do now, knowing that they have realistically or I guess you could say, and I saw a tweet, I think it was from CBS Sports or somebody, that they named like the Eagles, but that trio of corners, like the best trio cornerback in the league. I think it's Denver. And again, saying that as a Broncos fan, someone that writes about them, of course, I see it through orange lenses, but what they've put on film and what they say statistically in their numbers, I mean, Surtain, Moss, and McMillan, it gives Vance Joseph the freedom of leaving them on an island and making the defensive pass rushers and linebackers do extra stuff that maybe the offense haven't seen on tape. He could just play around with a lot of things, knowing that he is safe and he trusts those three corners. I mean, that takes a lot of trust. Not a lot of teams have that trust in their cornerback 2 or even cornerback 3. So again, I think it does help the defense a lot. And at this point, I don't see a weakness in terms of, I know the offense is going to target this guy, whether it's a linebacker or a corner or a safety, because right now I think every single level of the defense is playing great.
Yeah, and I think that, Brandon, like if, and we've said it a few times, like if you're going to be nitpicking the defense a little bit, it would probably be the linebacker room, and particularly at times one particular player, but it certainly seems like
words out of my mouth.
Yeah, it certainly seems like, every single time it seems like you're almost doubting him. I thought the perfect the perfect example of this, and it might have been Amir that shared it, was the clip of the guy who had been hating on, Cody Barton and, the signing of Cody Barton. And did you get a chance to see this, Brandon?
No, I didn't see it.
Go look up Amir Farrell. He's at Broncos Ave. He obviously does the show with Jordan, but he shared this clip, and it's this guy from the Washington Commanders, if you will, and he talked about how much Cody Barton has been a liability, and how he's just not great, and then in the sequence of what it is that you're seeing, and like you see him kind of mess up, it looks like on the play before the interception, and then the interception happens and he just goes silent, and he just goes completely silent, like what just happened. But it's something about this NFC South, I guess, for Cody Barton, because he is he's really risen above and basically become like Luke Kuechly of like that NFC South. And it just so happens to be with the Denver Broncos, Brandon.
Yeah. I was literally about to talk about Cody Barton, because he seems to be, if like there's one weak point of this defense, and unfairly, it seems to have been pointed at him. Yeah. And like, yeah, he did have some, mistakes that he'd made a bit earlier in the season, but dude's been playing his butt off for the past 2 games. I remember, like, even against the Chiefs, he was running pretty much almost step for step with the Chiefs' fastest player. Like, Cody Barton is incredibly athletic. Chiefs' fastest player now being Xavier Worthy. He's incredibly athletic, and he also proved that against the Falcons when he was able to come down with that interception. And, I mean, look, if that's the guy that's still the worst part of this defense is scary.
Well, and Jordan, I thought it was like a nice little like microcosm, or like where we are with Cody Barton, because it's like there's a moment in the game, right? Where they started Bijan Robinson out wide, they motion him, and then they do the wheel route, off of that. And Cody Barton's tried his hardest to get there, and and Cousins throws the perfect pass that basically leads Bijan perfectly for the first down. And then obviously as the game progressed, he ended up getting the interception. And to be fair, it was a pretty questionable decision by Kirk Cousins. But you certainly take it, and turnovers are turnovers, and yeah, that was a pretty critical moment of the game.
Is it just me, or like how much does Sean Payton hate the NFC South?
I mean,
and I feel like he's gotten Vance Joseph to buy into.
You know what it is, that the Panthers were the most to score
the most points on us out of the teams in that division.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that was insane.
And one of them was garbage, and one of the points was garbage, like garbage time. Yeah, it's just it's wild. All right.
Wasn't it like 125-37 or something total against that division?
I think that sounds right.
Like, that's insane.
Yeah. All right. We've reached the moment.
125-37. Yeah. Nice.
We've reached the moment of the show where it may or may not now officially go off the rails in a positive direction.
We've been on the rails.
Let's talk about this offense. Bo Nix is playing at such an elite level right now. He is playing at a level that, I really do hope a lot of people are looking at, what Bo has been able to do. And, it's just absolutely stunning. I mean, you look at basically his entire month of October, or I should say since the month of October. He's number one in every single one of those categories statistically. And then today we find out that he won AFC Offensive Player of the Week, beating Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions. And then he also won I'm sure he beat Jared Goff for Offensive Player of the Week, but he also beat Jared Goff again for FedEx's Air Player of the Week.
Yep.
And I'm assuming, knock on wood, I'm assuming, that he is going to end up winning, the offensive rookie of the week again. And, he's the first rookie, the first NFL rookie to throw for 300 yards, 80% completion percentage, and 4 touchdowns in a game. And he's also, and one of the other records that he broke, he was the first rookie quarterback to throw for over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns in 4 consecutive games since none other than the person who shares Brandon Miller's birthday, Peyton Manning. I mean, like, it is, so it's just crazy. Like, it seems like things are trending in this direction that it really gets to the point where I don't know if it's like, how could Broncos fans react? Because it's like, it really feels like things are just, the Broncos have a franchise quarterback. And I realize that, we do at times have to kind of pump the brakes a little bit, but like, by the same token, let us savor it, let us cherish and relish in the moment that we really might have a franchise quarterback with Bo.
I mean,
yeah. I'll let Jordan go first.
No, I was just gonna quickly say, like, I think the moment when I realized, like, all right, I think Nix is the one, was when he threw that pass over the middle of the field to Vele. Like, he doesn't throw that pass in week 1, nor in week 2. I mean, I think he said it today when he had his post-practice presser or whatever you want to call it. Like, the game's slowing down for him, and you can clearly see it. Like, it is very telling on the TV copy, even if you're at the game. Like, he is seeing everything right now. So, like, I understand there's a lot of people, like, pump the brakes on him. I mean, but I will say it's not like he's had 3 bad games in a row, then 2 good games in a row, and then 3 bad games in a row. It's not like that.
Drew Lock experience to a certain degree.
Yeah, exactly. He started off the year shaky. I mean, again, his first career game in Seattle, tough environment to play. I mean, we've had a tough schedule in terms of the opposing defenses. But right now, he's on like a 7-game stretch of just absolutely progressing, developing the right way, and just absolutely lighting it up. So I know Mike Kliss tweeted about it, but I mean, since week 4, you compare his passer rating to all the ones on the top, he's there with Goff, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and Justin Herbert.
And by chance, Jordan, are some of those quarterbacks MVP candidates?
I mean, if we're talking about that, I mean, I know Jared Goff is in the conversation. I know Lamar Jackson is in the conversation. And if the Bengals were any type of good and tough football team, Burrow would be in that conversation as well.
Yeah. Brandon, from the TV side of things, what were you seeing?
I was seeing a player that we haven't seen in a Broncos uniform in quite a while. Like, just in terms of how he dissected that defense. Like, that's just not something that we're used to seeing. Yes, he had some screens. Yeah, some of the screens went for touchdowns, and they were good touchdowns. Yes, he had a wide open tight end that leaked out for a touchdown because, like, the defense just forgot to cover him because he chipped first. Like, yes, all those things are true. But also, he made one of the best throws I've seen all year in that throw to Devon Vele. Who, by the way, Devon Vele. Broncos have a guy in Devon Vele, man. Devon Vele, Tim Patrick, I love you, but Devon Vele is Tim Patrick 2.0. Like, it's just it's insane how much he's picked up that torch, like, immediately. Mm-hmm. As a rookie, as a 7th round rookie. Insane. Well, he is also a bit older. He has that experience, which means he's not at his ceiling, rookie. Right? He's at his ceiling, actually, because he's too old.
Yeah, that's what they will say.
Yeah, he can't get any better.
Yeah,
it's not possible. And that was just special, man. It was just nice to see. Bo was ripping it all over the field, over the middle of the field, just making great decisions, making great throws. It was so much fun. Like, I don't remember the last time I had so much fun actually just watching a Broncos game. It was great.
I mean, Cameron, before you go, like, I vividly remember, and again, I was really young, but I know you guys remember too. Like Peyton Manning had, especially that 7 touchdown game against the Ravens, he had touchdown passes that were off of screens. So it's not like, so we didn't judge Peyton Manning when he did it. But now since Bo Nix is here and we haven't had a quarterback to do that, now we're going to judge him for that. Like, I'm not necessarily saying you guys, but I'm saying, like,
yeah.
obviously, like on social media, like I've seen that a lot and I don't understand it. Like, are we not going to give credit and credit is due in terms of we finally have a quarterback that can make changes at the line of scrimmage. If he sees that they're an all-out blitz, he's going to kill the play, go to the second play that he got in the huddle. That was probably, by the way, 30 words long because we all know how Sean Payne loves his words and his calls.
His word salad.
Kill the play and make it to a screen pass knowing that that's the right play. Like, we're not going to give credit to that because that's all what Peyton did in Denver. He always made the right call at the line. And Bo Nix looks like he's doing that as a rookie in his first year with Sean Payne. Again, it looks like it that's way. It could be a different story, but from what we're seeing, we haven't had a guy like that in a while. So we have to give credit when credit is due.
Well, and I think
that means he's a scheme merchant, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then what was it that we heard from, Josh Norris, and, credit to Josh Norris. The guys over there with the Underdog NFL and Underdog Fantasy, they were, I wouldn't say that they were on the fence with Bo Nix, but they were about more in the middle. But he had a statistic that came out yesterday which said that, Bo Nix over the course of a handful of games, leads the entire NFL in, what is it? Yards, yards per pass. It's like 20 plus, yards in terms of like pass, like air yards. Like, it's just like, that's not what we were told. Like, we were told he was a screen merchant. And, to your point, Jordan, it's like everything that we were told was that he was a screen merchant at Oregon or that he was part of the scheme. Well, you're going to be playing the game, the calls that are given to you depending on whether or not you want to audible it at the line of scrimmage. That's basically what Bo Nix is doing. And then also, to further this point, like, this game was the perfect example for why Sean Payton drafted Bo Nix. And I'm not saying that, like, all these other games, weren't, because, I thought that, specifically over the course of these last, 7-8 games, you've very much seen glimpses, of why Sean Payton drafted Bo Nix. But this game in particular, and I like the fact that, Tim Jenkins called this out in the sense of the boring play, because that is something that Sean Payton talked about. And then he makes the boring play, but so much so that, this was a game where in every single, you take away everything that, that he had, in terms of the screen game and everything else, that he was also elite, in nearly every other, category, every single other category. And what are you seeing right now? He's starting to get to the point where he is elite in nearly every single category that's not, his typical one, which has been screen games. So I thought that game against the Atlanta Falcons was such a great definition of why Sean Payton drafted, Bo Nix. And then you're seeing him operate and process and slow things down and, and do the whole, kill, at the line of scrimmage and, really have a command, of the huddle. And it was truly the first time really, and, to what, all of us were saying, like, that really was like the first time a quarterback had that kind of command for a stretch of games since Peyton Manning.
I mean, you saw it on the aforementioned throw to Vela. He killed the first play, didn't like what he saw, switched plays and delivered a absolute, just ridiculous, just frozen rope. Like, that throw was insane.
Yeah.
You guys watch the end zone view of that?
Oh, I had the fortunate view of the end zone already in the stadium.
Were you sitting behind the end zone?
I was in the end zone.
Oh, in the end zone.
And I had the perfect view to it. And let me tell you, Brandon, there was a collective oh shit in my section.
Yeah.
As there should have been.
Yeah. And I mean, like, and specifically like where I am, like I'm like on the backside. So like I'm sitting like where the players come out of the tunnel, the offensive, the Broncos come out of the tunnel. So like I'm seeing it like from behind, and it's just like, oh, this is like picture perfect. Like you could not have placed it any better. I mean, like, I think we were talking a little bit about it at times, in the chat, in terms of like his comparison, right? Because like we were said, oh, like he's going to be Drew Brees and so on and so forth. That's the kind of game like you're thinking, is this guy going to end up being like a Matt Stafford kind of game? Because like the way that he played, the throws that he made, and to go along with scheme, it was just perfect, and you're starting to see the Broncos and Sean Payton really scheme a lot of the players and the rightful players with the way that they need to. And might as well say it, Marvin Mims is becoming a Deebo Samuel for this offense right now. For the way that they've been using him, the motion, and I think I said on 5280, for not being a motion team, what seemed like the first half of the season, with Marvin Mims, you're seeing the motion. I guarantee, I don't know what the numbers are offhand in front of me, but I guarantee you the motion and how they've been using him will skyrocket because of the use of him. And you really are starting to see it really unfold with how they've been really using Marvin. And Marvin, you can tell the confidence is just growing by every single snap.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to see Marvin carving out some kind of a role in this offense. As much as we want to see him kind of turn into that deep threat that he was maybe projected as when we drafted him, but it also just felt like he's too talented to not get the ball to, and we just needed to find the right way to get in the ball because, he struggled too in the past, like at drops specifically, and just not being able to be as reliable as you need to be as a wide receiver at the NFL level. So it's nice to see us find some way to utilize him because he is just too talented to not use.
You know what's crazy? I think it was before the Chiefs game. I forgot who we played the week prior. I think it was the Ravens, correct? And in that post game, when I was doing with Broncos with Amir and J-Mac, I said, and I'm gonna get the clip later, but I vividly remember me saying we need to find some type of role for Mims, even if it's coming out of the backfield. And I suggested it. And I didn't get clowned in the comment section, but it was more so like, that's not going to happen. We don't have that type of player in them or whatever. But then I saw that in the Chiefs game. And I saw it the very first drive. It was the very first drive we saw Mims coming out of the backfield. And I think he even got a carry. And I'm like, this is very interesting. Like, this is very, very interesting. And then you saw the flashes. And then fast forward to this game. And we saw him out of the backfield a ton. And look at the damage he did then. I mean, I'm not going to say that Sean Payton watches. I'm not saying that. But I will say is it is refreshing to see a playmaker like Marvin Mims, because it looked like the first half of the season, he had no role within this offense whatsoever. It looked like he was a lost cause. I mean, all the names you could think of, everybody was just calling him a bust, all of that. Now that he's coming out of the backfield and we see him as more of that joker type of player that Sean Payton has mentioned, it looks like that has fit him perfectly. And I think it's going to give opposing defenses a lot of trouble.
Because I think that what people don't understand is that having Mims out of the backfield, schematically, a corner can't cover Mims at that point. Like a linebacker or possibly even an end, in terms of them dropping back in coverage, they've got to, get Marvin Mims, obviously with the help of a corner, in terms of something like that. We saw that, I think, on the motion play where, it was the Nate Atkins touchdown, where I think the defensive end backed out and he saw the defense basically lose sight of Nate Atkins because he saw Marvin Mims coming out. And so it just that goes to just how well of a weapon he's going to end up being, because you're going to end up with really good favorable matchups, with a linebacker on Marvin Mims, or someone who frankly is maybe not the best coverage person that's going to end up being on Marvin. So I think it's a really smart decision by them to truly get him involved. And I think that now it's going to afford guys like Troy Franklin really be that type of guy that's going to take the top off the defense and be another version of a space creator within, the middle part of the field and everything.
And Brandon, before
he's
you
only
go,
22. Yeah, go ahead.
And no, before you go, just real quick, it messes up with the personnel groupings as well. Like for the defensive standpoint, like if we're gonna have Mims out of the backfield and then a 3 wide receiver set, is the defense gonna think this is 11 personnel? Are they gonna account as Marvin Mims as a running back at that point? Are they gonna count him as a wide receiver? I mean, that changes the substitution patterns in terms of defense. In terms of what they put out there, are they gonna put an extra linebacker out there? Are they gonna go in a nickel defense and maybe we can give Marvin Mims a lighter box at that point, get him, a carry here? Like it, I'm telling you, it really, really changes the way defenses have to play, and that's the fun part about it. Because now we haven't had this type of personnel groupings and offensive creativity in a while, and now that we have Sean Payne and a guy like a Marvin Mims, and now we know that Bo Nix can make those type of plays and he's progressing the right way. It's fun. It's fun to talk about.
Yeah. And I mean, you saw him with the route down the sideline on that pass that he caught from Bo Nix in the first quarter or second quarter. And it just kind of makes you also envision. Go ahead.
No, just chef's kiss.
Yeah. It also just kind of makes you envision, how else can we try to get this guy the ball? Because yes, I think you can use him kind of in that Deebo Samuel role, but I think you can also use him as sort of the slant guy that obviously Sean Payton loves, right? You get him an easy matchup. You give him a route that's not too complicated. You give him a really catchable ball from Bo and just get him in space and let him go pick up some yak. I mean, he's incredibly athletic, fast, speedy wide receiver. I don't think you have to just run him out of the backfield. I don't think you have to just give him like those sort of wheel routes up the sideline either. I think you can also use him in quick slants and just get him the ball, let him go get 15 yards, let him go get 12 yards, whatever. Is that something that they're going to build into the offense? I obviously don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised as we maybe are more confident in him really, and being able to actually get him the ball and trust him with it.
Yeah. So, and I think that, for where things are going to be going with the wide receiver room, it seems like things are obviously, we talk about it at ad nauseum, and I know Jordan has talked about it ad nauseum, being the wide receiver room. But what I appreciate is it looks like the wide receiver room specifically is starting to take shape, except for the fact that the need for wide receiver one is still there, but you're starting to see 3 guys pretty much emerge in this room that are kind of keepers. And now I'm going to give you the floor, Jordan, because obviously you've been kind of hating on Courtland Sutton at times, but specifically as you kind of go through and you look through this stretch of 7-8 games, it is really hard to ignore the relationship that's going on between he and Bo Nix right now. And me personally, I think you're entering the realm where he does have to end up staying as a Denver Bronco at this point. But obviously the caveat is he can't be your wide receiver one. He's obviously, it's been treated as such this year. But he's really established himself that I think that with what's going on this year, he could be a really reliable wide receiver too.
Listen, I give credit when credit is due. Unlike some other people we know on social media, I'm not gonna continue to say, "Hey, he's the Kenny Pickett of wide receivers." I'm not that type of guy. I'll give credit when credit is due. Courtland Sutton has stepped up these few games. He really has, and I think we've seen that as a little, progression throughout the season. And I think he's finding real rapport with Bo Nix. And I like what you said there at the end, Cam. I think he can stay in Denver. I just don't think he's necessarily the wide receiver one. And if he's not, all right, let's just say hypothetically, he stays for another year, right? He's not that wide receiver one, and we bring in a true wide receiver one. I actually think that will unlock Courtland Sutton a bit more, if I'm being quite honest. I would like to hear your guys' thoughts on it, but
Yeah.
bringing one alongside with him would help him out a lot.
I have a question that's going to lead into my take on this situation.
Okay.
So it's been pretty obviously connected that obviously like we're going to be going after wide receiver. One of the wide receivers that has come up in the offseason basically constantly, like the wide receiver that comes up for this upcoming offseason has been T. Higgins from the Bengals. And there's been some recent reports that they're going to let him hit free agency. Do you see T. Higgins as a wide receiver one?
I do. For this team, I do.
Yeah. I think from this team's perspective, I do. But the question is just the money you're giving him, do you give him the money that's going to, well replicate the idea that he is wide receiver one, and that I don't know. But I agree that I think you put him here, he would be wide receiver one.
The reason I ask that question is I don't necessarily, I'm not saying he isn't a wide receiver one, but Mike, that's not where I'm going with this. I don't necessarily think that he isn't a wide receiver one, but I also like, there's a reason Jamar Chase is the wide receiver one in that offense. Like, and obviously, yes, Jamar Chase is one of the best wide receivers in the sport and also has an insane connection with Joe Burrow. But I'm not 100% sure that I see T. Higgins as the wide receiver one. And it's not even his fault because we haven't really seen him be able to do that. And the reason I bring that up is if you say, let's say T. Higgins is even a wide receiver, like let's say he's a 1.5, right? He's not quite a 2, but he's not quite a 1. For the money that we would have to pay to get him, I'd rather have Courtland Sutton as your wide receiver 2 and draft your wide receiver 1.
Yeah.
And I brought that up for a very specific reason because again, I don't know. I could see T. Higgins being a wide receiver 2, and I don't know if he's worth the money that you would pay him for that role. Could he be a wide receiver 1? Sure. I don't know. But he has benefited from having Jamar Chase next to him.
Yep. Could
you say Jamar Chase has benefited from having T. Higgins? Sure. But Jamar Chase is also just so good that it doesn't really matter. Yeah. So the reason I bring that up is like, for the money, I'd rather have Courtland Sutton than T. Higgins because I'm not 100% sure that T. Higgins can be the wide receiver 1 that you want. And even if you don't think Courtland Sutton is the wide receiver 1, I'd rather have him as your wide receiver 2 and someone else be the 1. Someone ideally that you draft.
It's almost like the Brandon Ayuk argument to a degree. Like, is Brandon Ayuk really a wide receiver 1? And obviously San Francisco paid him. And he's in an offense with a plethora of weapons. So is he really a wide receiver 1 or a weapon 1? I don't know. And would he have been a wide receiver 1 on, other teams? I don't know because he's not shown it. And I think that's the thing with T. Higgins. He's not really shown it, that he can be a wide receiver 1. It's clear that he's got talent. I almost like even look at the argument. Like, do you remember when the San Diego Chargers, Los Angeles Chargers, when they had Keenan Allen and a healthy Mike Williams?
Yep.
Like it's almost like, and it's funny because Higgins and Mike Williams played with one another, but it was like, it's like that argument to a degree because it's like, it's not that, T. Higgins isn't talented or anything, but you do wonder if he's like a 1.5 or something like that. Like you don't know if he's going to be that true 1, but you know that he's at least half of 1.
No, yeah, sure. I got your point. And in terms of, and I agree with what you said, Brandon. I think you do have to. We honestly don't know how it would turn out to be in the small sample size that I have found out about T. Higgins without Jamar Chase. He's played 5 games without him in his career. In his last 3 games, T. Higgins 9 catches, 148, 7 catches, 114, and 5 catches, 140. So I think he can do it without Jamar. But again, that's a small sample size, but it is an interesting conversation.
That's also with Joe Burrow.
That's also with Joe Burrow. This is correct. But it is an interesting conversation to have, though. Like, I do understand both points of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and let me just preface this. I'm not saying he isn't or can't be. I'm saying I don't know, and I'm not willing to pay that much money for I don't know. I'm saying I'm not the one making the decision, thankfully. But I'd rather have Cortland and draft someone.
Well, and I think that given where the current state is of the offense, and that is building around the young quarterback, everything's on the table. And I think if you ask what my personal preference is, I think KB even chimes in the chat that like I would rather go through the draft. And I think for me, that's more tempting because you can possibly, and I'm not trying to give Bronco fans PTSD, specifically the other person that's on our stream right now. But I'm just saying, I wouldn't be the least bit upset at all if the Broncos did what they did, where they took Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler in that one draft. Obviously, it didn't exactly work out, but I thought strategy-wise and the way that they did that to kind of upgrade the room, I thought was smart. It just unfortunately didn't get a chance to work out. And so I think that, maybe not necessarily back-to-back, but I think that really kind of upgrading that room, really to a certain degree, like what they did in this last class with Troy Franklin and Devon Vele, kind of doing something of that regard, but like maybe focusing a little bit, maybe in the first round, maybe taking a guy like a Trey Harris or, by sure happenstance, if a Luther Burden falls to you down, with where you're going to be sitting, you certainly can't rule out those trade ups. You know what I mean? Like, but I think for me, it would be really beneficial if you drafted. And I think the other one too is obviously like you can't rule out maybe Sean Payton not having a true number one and getting a guy like Tez Johnson, obviously, which is, Bo Nix's adopted brother.
It is interesting. Listen, I am a big draft guy in terms of the wide receivers, so that's always going to be a fun conversation with me. But if I would have to pick right now between, a T. Higgins type player in the free agency or a draft player, I would 100% say right now a draft player, just because we can get him with Bo Nix and they can kind of, progress together at, really young on their rookie contracts and stuff like that. So
Torrey Horton, baby.
Listen, there's a lot of sneaky wide receivers in this draft class that I think they can make some real damage.
Agbuka is my prediction right now as we kind of sit right now with round one. Moving forward with the other playmaker room, man, it feels like, for every inconsistent game every once in a while that Javonte puts out there, he responds with, a good game. Maybe not necessarily like the best game or like the elite of games, but enough to kind of make you scratch your head, right? Kind of make you scratch your head and be like, we want to get rid of this guy? And maybe that is actually the result, because the fact that he's been a little bit too inconsistent. You need a little bit more consistency there. And it may be one of the reasons why you are seeing a little bit of, Marvin Mims, a little bit more out of the backfield and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But, you got to give credit where credit is due, Brandon and Jordan. Javonte looked really good. For a lot of people, ourselves included, probably the one that Audric estimated to be running back one.
Yeah.
At least, going forward. Sean Payton just kind of said, hold my beer.
I mean, Brandon, what's your thoughts on this room? Like, they're just wildly. We don't know we honestly don't know who the starter is going to be against the Raiders. It can be anybody.
Dude, I don't know what my thoughts are on this room, because the one thing that I do know is this offensive line is damn good. This is a great offensive line.
Yeah.
And we're struggling to run the ball.
Yeah.
It's not the offensive line's fault. Then who else is going to be? The guys running the ball. Like, Javonte's looked okay. Audric Estime's looked okay. But I just don't think the running back that this roster needs, the running back that this team needs, is on this roster. I don't believe that. How can I? It's not been proven to me this entire season so far. And I mean, yeah, the Saints were a decent game on the ground, but the Saints also can't stop anything. Like, imagine if imagine if Bo had rookie Javonte Williams. See? But like he doesn't, and he's not going to. Like it's just pretty clear to me that this is not going to happen. So we got to get a running back in this draft class. I've talked about them before. Ollie Gordon, I really like. The running back from Iowa, whose name I am completely forgetting right now, Caleb Johnson, I also really like.
Great class.
Genty is just ridiculous. We're not getting him, but it's a great class to need a running back, and I think we should absolutely take a running back. I think we should absolutely take a wide receiver. I think we should absolutely take a tight end. I wouldn't be opposed to tight end in the first round. Load up on offense. But I don't like this. I don't like this room. I'm going to be honest. I don't like the room because I feel like they're not performing as well as they could be, especially with how good we've seen this offensive line be. It also just gives me more hope for the future of this offense because it's like, this is okay. I don't know how big or how I don't know how big of fans of Colin Cowherd you guys are. I don't know if you like him. I don't know if you hate him. He's someone that's I like to listen to just because he kind of knows Sean Payton and he says some interesting things. I don't enjoy listening to him all the time, but he did say something that made me just think. And specifically what he said, and I don't know if either of you've heard this, but he's obviously a big just Sean Payton fan. He's a big Bo Nix fan. Like, there's definitely an argument to be made that he's a bit biased because he is such great friends with Sean Payton. I'm not disputing that, but he did make an interesting point in that this is probably the worst roster that Bo Nix is going to have.
Yes.
Yep.
And I cannot help but also think he is referring to the running back room. We are now in week 12. Javonte Williams has 447 yards.
Not ideal. Not ideal at all. And
in hindsight, Joe Mixon in Houston, who's so good he doesn't even he made CJ Stroud disappear, has 10 touchdowns and 764 yards.
Jeez.
Just run back one is not on this roster.
I mean, we practically don't know who's going to be the running back one against the Raiders. After the Bucs,
the Raiders are a horrible defense too.
I mean, after the Bucs game in week 3, and Tyler Bidet had that kind of show out game, we heard all the rumblings throughout the week. Tyler Bidet is a starting running back against the Jets. Then he gets hurt, and then there was a new starting running back that got most of the snaps against the Raiders. And then it was Jaleel McLaughlin's turn against the Chargers. And then it was Javonte's turn against the Saints. That room hasn't been consistent whatsoever in terms of who's getting the majority of the snaps, who's getting this, who's getting that. We just don't know. Against the Chiefs, it was Estime. So obviously going into this game, we thought Estime was going to be our leading back. Then Javonte was our leading. He started and had the most touches. We don't know who's the leading back on Sunday against the Raiders. We have no clue.
It almost makes you wonder if, they're just looking schematically, what would be the best back that's going to be going up.
Maybe.
Against, the teams they're playing. But it is really interesting. But, I just there's a lot of ways where they can go, and they can go in for agency. They can possibly go into the draft, and but it was Cornelis LW that did mention about tight end, and obviously we know that the wide receiver room, and we touched on it, lacks wide receiver one. But I do think objectively, if you are looking at where this offense is, their biggest weakness is obviously tight end. You give Bo Nix, and Brandon, you mentioned tight end round 1. You give Bo Nix, Mr. Versatile from Penn State, Tyler Warren. Sean Payton will cook up some nasty stuff.
Yeah.
Colston Loveland.
But I'm talking Tyler Warren though.
I know. I love both of them.
Yeah. It is Yeah, it's going to be some crazy stuff in terms of like how he could be able to, scheme up a lot of touches for Tyler Warren. But this team desperately needs a tight end. But I will say, to the credit of Peyton and Lombardi and Davis Webb, who, by the way, shout out to Davis Webb, showing all this emotion on the sideline and support for his, support for his young QB. It's always fun to see on those all 22s. I will say I like the fact that even though we all know that the Broncos need a tight end, the games where that the offense is moving the ball pretty well, you see some plays sprinkled here and there that use the tight end. Obviously we've seen Nate Atkins now have a game where he gets a touchdown. Lucas Kroll be involved a little bit. Adam Troutman be involved a little bit. So it's certainly not the world beaters at tight end, but they're at least trying their hardest to get that tight end room involved. So you could just only picture, if they had, or if Sean Payton had his Jeremy Shockeys and Jimmy Grahams. And where did they go to school, Jordan? That's right.
By the way, I will be pushing the Elijah Arroyo agenda this draft.
But yeah, so it's clear that tight end is a position that might actually clear a wide receiver when all is said and done.
I mean, just look at just hear the names that we just talked about and what Bo Nix is dealing with. Like, with all due respect, but like,
so the best player on the team, Lucas Kroll, I agree.
I mean, we are talking about Nate Atkins, who is tight end, tight end 3, tight end 2, and fullback 2. We're talking about Adam Troutman, Lucas Kroll. I mean, they are running routes downfield for Bo Nix. And Bo Nix is making the most out of it.
Yeah. So much so that he has to throw a perfect seam ball in the end zone. And, kudos to Troutman. He made the catch. But, so much so that Troutman's got to make a difficult catch for the touchdown.
It's crazy.
All right. Any other final thoughts? We should probably actually touch on, them actually getting into the playoffs, as Jim Mora would say. The Broncos, it seems like, are on a track to make the playoffs. And, I will say this, the game upcoming is against the Raiders. It's a divisional game. It's going to be a very important game because obviously all divisional games are very important. And I think I even said this to you, Jordan, when we were talking about, it's like, for the way that they performed against this game against the Falcons, because like obviously you want to attack every single game on your schedule week by week, but given the fact that you beat the Falcons like a drum, who have a winning record and are the leaders in their division, that was a really important game to kick off possibly a 4-game stretch for you. Yep. Now, so with the Falcons, the Browns, the Colts, and the Raiders upcoming, obviously the Raiders are up first. Like Brandon and Jordan, like there is a window here and a logical, not biased, a logical window where they could finish with 9 wins when all is said and done heading into the bye week.
It wouldn't surprise me. It would not surprise me. Let's just do a quick. I mean, obviously we're going to preview the Raiders game, but I just want to do a really quick test / play a quick game with you guys. I'm just going to read off our next opponent for the next, rest of the season, basically, and just give me your gut reaction win or lose. Just immediate, like don't think about it. Knowing what you know about
you go
this
first,
team,
Jordan.
knowing what you know about the opponent at this point in time, give me your immediate prediction. Raiders.
Win.
Browns. At home.
Win.
Colts.
At Indianapolis, right? Or at Denver?
Nope, in Denver.
Wow. That's a win.
Yep. Okay. Chargers.
Thanks a loss.
Okay. So we're at 3 wins in a row and 1 loss. So we're now at 9-6. Okay. Bengals.
Win.
10-6. Chiefs. At home, last week of the year, Chiefs are probably not playing starters.
That's what I was just gonna ask. I mean, we technically beat them with the starters in Kansas City, so I would be knocking that as a win.
So that's 11 wins. And that's like on the great side of things. Like that things could not go according to plan, and we still end up with 10 wins.
Which is above our ceiling, by the way. A lot of people, myself included, predicted that it would be 7-10 their floor, 10-7 their ceiling. So if you're 11-6, like that's a game above what their ceiling should have been. Which, you know, even if you go 10-7, that's above expectations.
I think 9-6 gets you into the playoffs right now.
Well, even I'd be curious what the scenarios would be. You know, say because I too have. Win against the Raiders, win against the Colts, win against the Browns to get you to 9. They get to 9 and they're into the bye week. I have no idea what the scenarios there's going to be for the playoffs because there is a very real chance that going into that Chiefs game, they've actually already clinched a playoff spot and they don't need to worry about all the playoff implications. They can just go play ball. Which is actually a scary thought when you actually play the Chiefs, and it's at home and everything because now you got nothing else to lose.
Yep. Yeah, I mean,
could happen.
Again, it's the NFL; anything can happen. But again, just initial gut reaction. I do have that Chargers game as a loss because I do respect what Harbaugh is doing over there in Los Angeles with the Chargers. That's a tough physical football team, but I mean, he
turned that defense around in overnight.
Yep. And I just respect what he's doing over there, but everything's right in front of them for Denver. They just got to execute. That's all they got to do.
Just like the CU Buffaloes, they control their own destiny right now. They really do.
Well,
George's like, I'm not going there.
Yeah, I don't think tonight's the proper
night. So let me kind of continue the conversation a little bit. So like in this stretch of these next 3 games, because I do think a lot of people are, and I, as I said, and I'm sure you, Brandon, like you, well, let me just spin it back to you right before I say this. You have these next 3 games as a win-win-win based on your initial reaction.
Yes.
Okay, so let's look at these 3 games. Is there a game on that 3-game stretch here that probably worries you the most?
Yeah.
Maybe the Browns, just because Jameis Winston's kind of airing it out a little bit. Anthony Richardson did look pretty good coming back from being benched, but from what we've seen from Anthony Richardson, like I don't know if that was a flash in the pan. Anthony Richardson against the secondary, we'll see. I'm going to say the Browns for now, just because, I mean, they have quite a few decent weapons. Like David Njoku is good for them. Cedric Tillman is good for them. Well, they can't really run the ball, so they're really one-sided. So that's not, I mean, that doesn't help them. But Jameis Winston has looked pretty okay. The Raiders are just terrible. The Colts, again, I kind of already talked about them. So yeah, I would say the Browns. Probably.
Ironically for me, it's this game coming up. Listen, I know the Raiders are terrible. These divisional games, it's just tricky.
And it is in Vegas, so I mean that is fair. Also, Brock Bowers, man, holy crap!
So getting into this game here, what do you do? So I think this is when it helps having a divisional game, because now you can get a chance to. I will say this: the Broncos went and obviously thanks to a Pat Surtain 100-yard pick six, it turned the entire game around. Basically, it turned it on its head, and it became a very big blowout. I will say, if I am the Raiders, I'm not feeling the least bit good going into this game, because even though it was a 30-point output by the Broncos, against the Raiders, and they really didn't contribute much. The way that offense is coming in from the Broncos side of things would worry me if I'm the Raiders, because the quarterback over there, number 10, is playing at a much higher clip than he was playing us last.
Oh yeah.
And that should worry you. And then specifically from the Broncos defensive side, Jordan and Brandon, the biggest adjustment I probably would make is one that I think we even talked about, Brandon, before the Raiders game, and that is, should PS2 be on Brock Bowers? And I think now at this particular point in the season, I don't think you have any choice.
I mean, who else do you put him on? He's their only weapon.
PS2 is going to end up having to be on Brock Bowers, I would think.
Unless they go the Belichick route, you put PS2 on Jacoby Myers, then you double Brock Bowers.
Yeah. So then how would you double him then?
You gotta get a safety. You gotta sub in that a linebacker for a safety too. You gotta go like in a big nickel over G type package with the defense. But what's also interesting for this game, the Raiders are going to see a lot of changes and differences with the Broncos in this matchup, because remember, in the first game, McGlinchey didn't play. Mm-hmm. It was Palczewski at the right side. So now Crosby's going to be most likely going against McGlinchey.
Who he's owned in the past.
I mean, and then also the Raiders haven't seen the role, or they haven't experienced in real game time action the role now that Marvin Mims has on this offense.
Yeah.
That's two major changes.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting. And real quick, what do you guys have for a prediction of this game?
$38-6.
If it's another one of those kind of games, at that point, I would just feel like, lock it down. Broncos are going to the playoffs. I think at that point, I would get obnoxious on the timeline.
Yeah, I think everybody would, if I'm being quite honest. My prediction, I have it 27-9 Denver.
So not exactly 38-6, but 27-9. Yeah, I think the other thing that needs to be touched on is Gardner Minshew was beating the Broncos with his legs a little bit in the early part of that game, and one reason why they were sustaining drives. So probably want to watch out a little bit for that. And I do think there's that chance, because it's Antonio Pierce, where you also will have to be prepared that you might still see Aiden O'Connell. You know what I mean? Like, you still might see Aiden O'Connell. So as much as you we're going to be seeing Gardner, you also had the pleasure of seeing Aiden O'Connell in Denver. So you can't rule anything out, at that point. I think I had 30-10 Denver. What was the score?
Realistically, I'll say 27-10.
27-10. Which, by the way, not to pat myself on the back, but I was like 90% there for the prediction of this last Sunday's game. We just needed one touchdown, from Bo, which was a rushing touchdown, and I probably would have been on cloud 9. But at least I got the hardest one out of the way, which is the 300-yard game and the 4-touchdown game. I will say, not to be on cloud 9 again, there is a very real chance that Bo Nix could throw for 300 again against this Raiders defense. When you go look at their injury report, Hobbs was out.
Yeah.
Like all three of their starting corners missed today's practice on Wednesday. No. So
I'm bringing back 38-6.
But all right. Wrapping up the show, obviously we do talk a little bit about some draft prospects. So it seems only fitting that we ask the person who has Cam Ward leading the Heisman Trophy, campaign, if you will, and that would be the Miami Hurricane fan. what impressed you so much about Travis Hunter when you actually were getting the chance to watch him in person, and why is he the Heisman Trophy winner?
Well, let's not take it that far, but what I will say, watching Travis Hunter live it's unique. I think that's the best way to describe it. It's unique, and I think what gets or I would say what doesn't get talked about enough is that he's doing this in the altitude. He's playing every snap, and it's even more impressive just seeing it, because watching him have that ridiculous catch on 4th and 2 against Utah. I mean, the whole stadium didn't even know he caught it until he stood up with the ball. I mean, and then what he's doing corner wise as well. I mean, I know he did get beat on that one touchdown, but what he does at the corner position as well can't go underestimated as well. But him as a wide receiver, though, because everyone knows I'm a big wide receiver guy. What he does as a wide receiver is pretty special.
Did you have a certain positional takeaway? Like, do you think he's better in one particular area? Like, if you're looking at the next level and you're an NFL team, you're an NFL team, you're the New England Patriots. Are you drafting him as a wide receiver? Are you drafting him?
I'm drafting him as a wide receiver. If I have to pick only one side of the ball for him to play right now, I think he's wide receiver.
Yeah. Gosh, man. I don't know. It's just because the one thing you can't really take it for granted is like he's elite at both areas, and he is elite at both areas, and he's just such a special talent. What's up, Mark? So Brandon, you're probably doing some Google searching of some prospects over there. We talked about some running back prospects, but who are some of those players that are been kind of catching your eye?
No, I was actually sending an email for work because
working on the job. I'm very proud of you.
Have a problem. I mean, honestly, I don't really have a new name to throw at you guys. Like, I have my guys that I'm a fan of, and nothing has changed. Let me just say this. I am wanting to take a closer look at specifically the other running backs in this class, because I know I've kind of thrown out Caleb Johnson. We've talked about Ollie Gordon, but I just the more I think about what this offense needs and the more I watch us fail to run the ball, the more I'm like, we got to find that explosive running back. We got to find the Alvin Kamara of this class. And it's such a deep class. Like, I'm excited to see who that may be. I don't know exactly who else to list at this point. I'm going to be honest, but I'm still a big fan of Caleb Johnson. I think he's really good. I'm specifically intrigued by there's a couple of names from Ohio State. Actually, both of their running backs look intriguing, Judkins and Henderson. Judkins is more like,
he's your NCAA 25 merchant, but yeah,
gigantic. And Henderson is kind of more of your speed guy, I guess, a little bit. But he's still built like a tank. So both of those guys definitely intrigue me, but I think there's some names to be had later on in the draft that could turn into bell cow difference maker running backs. So I'm definitely excited to kind of dig into that a little bit more. Those two names specifically jump out at me. I want to watch them more.
Well, what is it? There's one guy. What is it? Kyle, I think Kyle Monangai, the guy from Rutgers. Funny enough, he runs a lot like Isaiah Pacheco, who obviously Pacheco's from Rutgers. But one player, and obviously the CU Buffs have a really big game this upcoming weekend against Kansas. But one running back that I would actually like to file away is Devin Neal. Devin Neal is Devin Neal from Kansas. Really interesting back. Also, in regards to the Colorado side of things, I probably would want to keep tabs on some of those wide receivers. Maybe not just Travis Hunter, but some of those other wide receivers. And don't quote me on this, but if I'm not mistaken, but Jimmy Horn's dad, Joe Horn, played with Sean Payton in New Orleans. And we know that Sean is, really big on connections. So I wouldn't be the least bit surprised, if, that was a thing. And then that's one of the reasons why you can't really ignore guys like Tej Johnson either, because of the, and obviously with the amount that they've spent, at his Oregon Pro Day and possibly being strongly interested in a guy like Bucky Irving, which clearly, it was clear that the Broncos could have used a guy like a Bucky Irving, after kind of seeing what he's doing.
Just turn into the Denver Ducks.
Yeah. But yeah, Jake Ferguson, if we're going to be talking about tight ends, or not Jake Ferguson, Terrence Ferguson from Oregon. So he's not necessarily a first-round tight end, but we did mention guys like Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland. So there's definitely some other guys, certainly. And then Mark from Georgia ends it by saying, are we now convinced that we have a franchise quarterback for the naysayers? Well, I can't speak for Jordan and I can't speak for Brandon, but I will say if that is what a cosplayer looks like as a franchise, quarterback, I'd say the Broncos are doing quite well.
To answer that question, I am convinced that we have found our guy.
I'm not going to say yes or no yet, but I am very excited. We'll just say that.
I think the appropriate way to wrap it all up is probably the way that probably Jordan and I saw the game on Sunday. Because, I don't know how you felt, Jordan, and I didn't get a chance to watch, a Manning game, in person, per se, an actual Bronco game that I can remember, with Manning. But I will say, it had a very different feel. It felt like, not a playoff game, but it felt like in listening to the fans and listening to their reaction, it was like they accomplished something. So I don't know whether or not, officially he's a franchise quarterback, but I will say for what he played and what he looked like on that Sunday game and the way that he's played in the last 7, he is really darn close to locking that up. He is really darn close to locking that up, if not already. I mean, he is. So, and it was clear that the fan base really got a sense of that.
I've been to Denver games here in Miami, and whenever they play here, and just the vibe from the Broncos fans walking out of those stadiums, you never got a sense of, we're confident in our quarterback room and our starting quarterback. But coming out of the preseason game I went to in Indianapolis, his very first game, there was a sense with other Broncos fans saying we might have found our guy. And then going to that Tampa game where the Denver fans just took over that stadium, walking out of that game, seeing his first win and how he performed there was a buzz. But then after walking out of that stadium Sunday against the Falcons, it felt like I walked out of that stadium, at least for me.
You had I will say you had a glow.
I felt comfortable and confident in a quarterback that I haven't, felt that way in a while.
Yeah. So it was, but it's a gratifying feeling. And if he puts together, what Big Mike mentioned, and it was when we talked about the 300 game against the Raiders, if he does that, he will, in fact, I would imagine, lock up another Rookie of the Month. And if he does that,
It's time to have a conversation.
if not already, and I should say, it's actually time to have very uncomfortable conversations of not just offensive Rookie of the Year at that point.
Well, I don't think people are ready for that.
Yeah, because, what was it? He's the last offensive player of the week that won as a rookie since, right?
Yep.
CJ Stroud.
And I was told he was the next superstar in the NFL. So, hey, listen, if he continues to do what he's been doing the last 7 weeks and he just replicates it against the Raiders, ends November on a good note, it's going to get real hot.
Yeah, it's going to get a bit spicy in December. And hopefully, it would be very appropriate that he ties a bow on it, right, and becomes the franchise quarterback right around the month of, Christmas. And, it's a nice little Christmas gift for fans.
Yeah.
Before we go, Jordan, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, where they can find your work, and where they can hear you blabber on more about the Denver Broncos.
Well, you can find me on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at Jordan T. Lopez. I've been very fortunate to actually get, quite a few new followers on X. I'm very, very thankful for that. Never would have thought that I would garner that much engagement ever in my life. I was just there just to talk to people like Cam and Brandon and any other people that just write about the Broncos and stuff like that. So having that actually kind of feels good. So you can find me there. Also do all my writing stuff at Predominantly Orange and stuff. I will be writing this week. Hopefully it's about Marvin Mims and his new role that he's carved out with the offense, and go a little bit deeper into that. But yeah, you can find me on Twitter there, then Predominantly Orange when I write my stuff. And then also I am a co-host at Broncos Avenue along my great brothers Amir Farrell and Jordan Mackey, which are just two great guys. So you can find me there as well.
Maybe we'll have to do a Broncos Ave and mainly Broncos crossover at some point, either here, or, over on your guys' channel, where we can, find some time where we can drag Four Eyes over here, and have him, well, his name is Brandon Miller. So he's really easy to pick on, considering the fact that he has the same name as someone, who's an NBA player, which, again, if you tag him, by the way, on X and Twitter, he is not the NBA player, Brandon Miller. And as you can tell, they look very, very different. Make sure you follow Brandon. Make sure you follow Brandon over there on Twitter at Brandon Miller PO. As you can see there with Jordan, you can follow him at Jordan T. Lopez. And the show that he does over there, Broncos have. Myself, you can follow both Brandon and I, because he and I both use the Manely Broncos Twitter account at Manely Broncos, and myself at Cameron Parker PO. And hopefully, come next week, we are talking about a Denver Broncos, another winning streak where they have beaten the Las Vegas Raiders and swept the Las Vegas Raiders on the season in the division. But before we go, remember,
Let's go Broncos! God bless Bo Nix!
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Tempo's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast racking up the flight miles. So high, I might never come down, so what